Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open what looks like a massive vault of political science. And it's all dedicated to a level of government that, frankly, is often the most consequential but maybe the least visible to the average voter.
Yeah.
We're talking about Polish regional politics.
We are, and it really is the hidden engine room of policy in Poland.
The hidden engine room, I like that.
We are diving into a comprehensive, multi-year research cycle. It's titled Gra o Regioni,
Which translates to?
the game for regions.
Okay.
And it is a monumental effort. It's focused exclusively on elections to the Sejmiki,
Voivodeship parliaments, the regional assemblies.
Exactly, and it's really a decades-long commitment to filling a pretty glaring knowledge gap.
Right, because when we talk about Polish elections, the spotlight is always blindingly bright on the national parliament, the Sejm, or maybe the presidential race.
Always.
And then when we zoom in, we talk about mayors, city councils, that kind of thing. But this regional layer,
It gets lost.
it's often forgotten, yeah. Seen as, I don't know, a bureaucratic middle ground or something.
And that's precisely why this research cycle, which formally started tracking all this back in 2006, set out to show just how profoundly important it actually is.
And the knowledge gap isn't just some academic thing, right? It has real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
if you ask a citizen who runs their neighborhood park, they might know. But the regional assembly.
Most people would probably struggle.
Exactly. Most people don't fully grasp that this level of governance controls these immense budgets and makes fundamental life-shaping decisions for entire regions.
Like what? What are we talking about?
Everything from managing hospitals to building major transport links. So ignoring the Sejmiki means you're ignoring a vast amount of political power.
Okay, so we need to establish the stakes immediately. Because the financial scale you're hinting at it sounds astonishing.
It really is. We're not talking about small subsidies here. When the researchers started compiling this data in the early 2000s, the regional self-governments were already handling substantial sums.
Okay.
If you look at the progression, back in 2002, the collective budgets of all 16 Polish voivodeship self-governments stood at just over 4,400 million PLN.
4.4 billion. That's already a serious amount of capital.
A very serious amount.
But hold on to that number because you said this is about the growth, right?
Oh.
The trajectory is what fundamentally changed the game.
Exactly. Fast forward to today, 2024, and that figure has just ballooned to almost 36,000 million PLN.
36 billion.
It's an 8-fold increase in just over 2 decades.
Wow.
And this growth, it didn't just happen because of, standard inflation. It was fueled by new responsibilities and, crucially, the massive influx of EU structural funds that these regions manage and distribute.
Ah, okay. So that's the key. That's the critical implication here. 36 billion zlotys, and a lot of it tied to these huge multi-year EU funding cycles. That's a staggering amount of power. It must have fundamentally shifted the gravitational pull of money.
It did. Before, regions were very dependent on central transfers from Warsaw.
Right, top down.
Now, because they manage these huge long-term development funds, their autonomy and their clout have dramatically increased. This money is what makes the game for regions such a deadly serious contest.
It absolutely has to. So the financial muscle is now a strategic asset. What about the decisions themselves? Where does that power lie?
Well, it lies in their control over critical decision-making areas. They're responsible for determining the core regional development strategies.
So setting the economic and social path for the whole region for years to come.
Yes, often for years. It's basically macroeconomic planning on a regional scale.
Okay, that's high level. What about the more tangible stuff?
Well, beyond that high-level strategy, they manage core infrastructure.
Like roads.
Not just municipal roads, but major regional arteries, the regional rail networks, and coordinating public transit that links the big cities to the smaller towns.
So if you live, say, 50 kilometers outside a major city.
The accessibility of your job, your services, it depends directly on decisions made by the Sejmik.
Which means it impacts everything. Labor mobility, attracting investment where people choose to live.
Everything. And they also handle major social issues and, maybe most critically in terms of budget and public impact, a huge portion of healthcare.
Healthcare.
These are services that directly touch every single resident of the region every single day.
How so?
The regional government oversees hospital placement, major infrastructure modernization for medical facilities, the overall regional health strategy. When you hear about an issue with hospital services, The Regional Assembly, the Sejmik, and its executive board, the Zarzud, are directly on the hook for the strategic response.
So what we have is a political body that controls monumental budgets and services vital to every citizen.
Yes,
Yet it operates in a relative political shadow compared to the national stage.
that's the dissonance.
And that leads us directly into why this long-running research project was so necessary in the first place.
That's the link, exactly. The researchers who kicked off this Game for Regions cycle back in 2006, they observed a very, very clear political science blind spot.
They saw a gap in the academic landscape.
A huge one. They
Right.
realized this crucial layer of government was just severely underexamined.
Right. Most of the sociological attention was, as we
Well-
said, laser-focused on the national scene.
Parliamentary, presidential, you name it.
Or, on the other end, these hyperlocal micro-case studies of a few selected cities or gminas.
Exactly. And they noted the severe lack of comprehensive comparative analyses that covered all the Polish voivodeships at the same time, consistently, across election cycles.
So you had a systemic lack of vision. You might find a deep dive on one region, but nothing that connected all the dots nationwide.
Precisely. You'd get a great dissertation on Mazovia, or maybe a study comparing two big cities, but a nation-spanning consistent comparison of regional political competition. It simply didn't exist in a unified long-term format.
And that means conclusions about Polish politics were being drawn from a really incomplete picture.
A picture that was basically just Warsaw. It was ignoring all this regional complexity.
And the urgency to study this level was underscored by the nature of the competition itself.
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Absolutely. The research became vital because of the dominance of national political parties in this regional competition.
The big players.
The big players. The high stakes, that 36 billion PLN budget, control over EU funds, it naturally attracts them.
Of course.
And this centralizing pressure made it absolutely critical to understand how national political narratives, ideological fights, and party structures actually play out at the regional level, rather than just treating regional politics as, a faint echo of what's happening in Warsaw.
So if the national parties are the main players, then the regional outcomes become a crucial kind of laboratory.
Exactly, a laboratory for understanding the resilience, the internal organization, the geographic reach of those national parties themselves.
So the research shifted the focus. It wasn't just about reporting national party results anymore.
No, it was about analyzing the regional context those parties have to operate within.
Okay, now let's talk about the historical foundations of this research cycle. Specifically, those initial foundational elections of 1998 and 2002.
Yes.
The sources say they were compiled into a single volume, which presented significant analytical difficulties. Why group them together, and what made them so tricky to compare?
Well, they grouped them because 1998 is when the current 16 voivodeship administrative structure was established. It was the birth of the modern system.
And 2002.
2002 was the first subsequent test of that new structure. So they were, the foundational elections for the new regional map of Poland. But comparing them directly was an analytical minefield.
A minefield, why?
Because the system itself was still in flux, it hadn't settled yet.
What were those structural shifts that made it so complicated?
There were three major ones, which made a true apples-to-apples comparison really difficult. First, there was a reduction in the total number of regional councillors. The Radnicz Wojewódzki elected in 2002 compared to 98.
Fewer seats.
Fewer seats. And that fundamentally alters the calculus for smaller parties. It impacts the threshold you need to get representation.
So less legislative space means fiercer competition for the seats that are left.
Correct. Second, there were significant changes in the size and the boundaries of the electoral districts.
Gerrymandering. Or just adjustments.
More like adjustments. In 2002, the size of the districts generally got smaller. And this shift emphasizes more localized dynamics. It can give more weight to local personalities over the big national party labels.
Or at least it changes the campaign strategy you need.
It has to. If the districts are smaller, your campaign focus necessarily shifts from regional media to hyper-local groundwork.
So you have fewer seats available, and the goalposts for winning those seats are constantly moving because of the boundary changes.
Exactly. And the third factor, maybe the most disruptive one, was the change in the structure of the national political actors themselves.
The parties.
The parties. Between 98 and 2002, you had significant mergers, dissolutions, rebrandings of major political entities.
So the players on the field changed their jerseys.
Right. And since these national actors dominate the regional game, Any shifts at the top tier, like a major coalition breaking up or a new national force emerging, that drastically altered the competitive field in every single voivodeship.
Which means the researchers couldn't just track Party A from 1998 to 2002. They had to track these complex successor parties and coalitions.
It was a huge headache.
But despite those difficulties, including them as foundational was essential.
It was, because they established that initial political template for the new modern regional self-governance. It gave the necessary context for all the later, more standardized research cycles.
The ones covering 2006, 2010, and so on.
That's the framework. Those subsequent elections were conducted under more stable legislative rules, and that allowed the researchers to finally establish a consistent comparative methodology. And that's vital for understanding political evolution over time.
Okay, so let's transition into the core research objectives. Beyond just documenting the results, what were the major questions they were trying to answer about how these regional political dynamics actually work?
Well, their primary overarching goal was to capture this elusive thing they called the regional specificity of political competition.
Regional specificity.
They didn't want their books to just read like 16 repetitions of the national party battle. They wanted to understand the unique texture, the unique characteristics that made political life in, say, Lobisky distinct from the dynamics in Merfel-Polski.
And how do you even begin to quantify or capture that specificity when the big national parties are fielding candidates everywhere?
By identifying the underlying conditions, they call them ura and kuania, that shape the behavior of the regional political actors.
Conditions like what?
They looked closely at political, economic, and demographic factors. For example, they looked at differences in urbanization rates. Is the region dominated by one massive city or a network of smaller towns? They looked at regional wealth disparity, unemployment, historical voting patterns, even things like the lasting impact of previous national referenda or historical regional allegiances.
So, in a highly urbanized, economically successful Western region, the messaging about public services and growth would have to be different than in a more rural, less industrialized Eastern region.
It would have to be.
The National Party has to modulate its message to fit those regional realities.
Precisely. And this dynamic, it feeds right into the central question the research sought to address.
Which was?
To what extent do the dominant divisions on the national scene, the big ideological splits, the government versus opposition dynamic, to what extent do those influence the structure of the regional political markets?
And where does that regional uniqueness manage to push back?
Exactly. Where does it override or at least modify that national gravitational pull?
This highlights a real tightrope walk for regional politicians, doesn't it?
It does.
They have to appeal to their national party loyalties to get funding and prestige, but at the same time, they have to address these hyper-local regional challenges.
A specific hospital closure, a local transport crisis.
That might even contradict the national party line.
It creates enormous internal tension within the parties themselves, and the research tracks how the regional branches manage that friction.
So that focus on behavior leads to their second goal, which was what?
Analyzing market openness and the structure of the actors. The researchers focus very intently on the level of openness of these regional political markets.
And by openness, you mean how easy it is for new or non-traditional players to gain a foothold.
Exactly.
Because if the national parties consume all the oxygen in the room, it's a closed shop.
It is. So they analyze the possibility for strictly regional, non-national political entities, or even local, non-partisan municipal coalitions, to enter the market and compete effectively against the established national behemoths.
So were there any regions where a genuinely local movement focused purely on regional identity or a single issue managed to get seats in the Sejmik?
That's precisely the question they were asking. And the answer varies wildly from region to region and over time.
And what would a finding of high openness tell us about the political system?
Well, if the market is open, it suggests genuine political autonomy and diverse representation. It means the system is receptive to bottom-up pressure.
And if it's closed?
If the market is completely closed, monopolized by 2 or 3 national forces, it indicates that the regions are primarily just extensions of Warsaw politics, and that true regionalism struggles to survive electorally.
And the research has metrics to show whether that openness is increasing or decreasing over time.
Yes, specific metrics. It's crucial for understanding the health of regional self-government.
Okay, now let's move beyond voting day itself. The analysis didn't stop once the ballots were counted.
No, in many ways, that's when the most interesting part begins,
The intense phase of government formation.
which is often a more complex game than the election itself. The research dedicated a huge focus to the post-electoral processes and the coalition mechanics.
So how the winning parties actually formed the regional governing bodies, the organs wodzy samartodes.
Yes. This is where the money is actually managed. This is where the power is wielded.
Okay, let's just clarify the institutional structure for everyone listening. We've been talking about the Sejiki Województw, the regional parliament. That's the legislative body.
Correct. It passes regional laws and budgets.
But what's the executive body? The one that actually holds the power and that 36 billion PLN budget.
That is the Voivodeship Board, or the Zarzobojevodztwa.
The Zarzad.
This is the executive cabinet, and it's headed by the marshal, the Marzek. The key thing is that the Sejmik elects the Zardzad.
Ah, so the legislative body and the executive body have to work together.
It forces intense negotiation among the parties after the votes are cast.
So the research was tracking how these executive boards, these Zarzado, were formed. What were the specific questions they were asking?
They needed to characterize the preferred outcomes. So, first, was the board formed by a single-party majority, which is pretty rare in the regions, but it can happen,
Or by a coalition.
or by a coalition. And second, if it was a coalition, what was its nature? This broke down into analyzing stability. Was
Yeah.
it a minority government?
Inherently unstable.
Very unstable, but sometimes necessary. Or was it a minimal winning majority?
Just enough parties and councilors to guarantee a slim majority.
Right. Which suggests maximum leverage for the biggest party, but it's often a very precarious stability.
Okay, and what was the other option?
A surplus majority. Or Nadwikoi.
A surplus majority, so a coalition with more partners than you strictly need to command a majority.
Exactly. And the research tracks why parties might choose to do that.
Yeah, why give up leverage? Why bring in unnecessary partners?
Well, it's often a strategic choice for maximum stability, particularly in volatile political climates. It's insurance. By bringing in a smaller party that's maybe philosophically aligned but electorally weak, you solidify your majority against potential defections or shifts in the national political wind.
It could also be a defensive move, right, to preemptively block out certain opposition forces.
Or that. Or sometimes it's just an unavoidable result of coalition bargaining, where one partner demands inclusion for non-electoral reasons, maybe due to pressure from the national level.
So the nature of that coalition, minimal winning versus surplus, it tells a story about the political confidence and strategy within that region.
It tells a huge story, and most importantly, the research sought to determine if the electoral competition patterns found reflection in the subsequent coalition bargaining, the Prezatarga Koalicji Sieć.
In other words, did the results at the ballot box translate directly into power in the Zarzad?
Or did external factors like national party directives, personal animosities between regional leaders, backroom deals, did those things supersede the mandate given by the voters?
This sounds like a tremendous undertaking in terms of just raw data collection. The commitment is incredible. Let's shift to the richness of the research material itself, because covering 1998 to 2024 is a monumental longitudinal achievement.
It's a rare scientific asset. I mean, the researchers amassed material covering every single regional election during this period. It's probably the most comprehensive long-term database available for analyzing Polish regional political transformation.
What specific quantitative data points were they collecting to paint this detailed picture over decades?
Well, they collected the foundational numbers, detailed turnout figures, and the full voting results per region and, crucially, per electoral district.
So very granular.
Vary, but they went beyond static snapshots. They tracked the results of individual competing entities and, critically, their gains or losses across multiple consecutive elections.
Ah, so the long view.
This longitudinal view lets them map the rise, the stability, or the decline of political forces with precision over decades.
And since we just discussed the importance of the executive board, I assume they meticulously tracked who was actually in charge.
Absolutely vital. They compiled the detailed composition of the voivodeship boards, the Zarzodał. Not just at the moment they were formed, at the start of the term,
But also at the end.
but also at the end of the term.
Why is that so critical?
Because regional coalitions are often volatile. They can be very unstable. So tracking the composition at the end reveals the political stability, or the lack of it, over the four-year term. It chronicles internal conflicts, party defections, midterm reshuffles that can dramatically change who controls that 36 billion PLN.
That stability tracking provides a crucial measure of whether the initial coalition bargaining was successful or just flawed from the start.
It measures the resilience of the regional elite structure, but the study goes beyond just the numbers. It incorporates this rich qualitative data to understand the mechanics of political success and failure.
So they performed a detailed analysis of the election campaigns themselves.
They did.
Tell us more about that.
This includes tracking significant events that influenced campaign dynamics, things like major regional crises, scandals, high-profile visits from national party leaders. And they meticulously reviewed the campaign slogans, the Hasul Weiborts, used by the various committees,
Why the slogans?
to see if they focused on national narratives or genuinely regional issues.
Analyzing the slogans over time must reveal that shifting balance. Are they promising to make Poland great again? Or are they promising to fix the Loa-Silesian rail network?
That's precisely the distinction. And perhaps most revealing of the internal party power structure is the data they compiled concerning the recruitment processes for the electoral lists of the main regional players.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting for political insiders. Analyzing recruitment is the key to understanding the regional elite. What exactly did they track?
They tracked who was placed on the electoral lists and why. This reveals the shifting power balance between the national headquarters in Warsaw and the regional party structures. For instance, are national parties predominantly fielding established, powerful, local, regional figures, the local barons who have deep ties in the region?
Or are they parachuting in national loyalists?
Exactly. Parachuting in people who maybe failed to secure parliamentary seats, using the regional lists as a sort of holding pattern, or worse, a training ground for future leaders who are controlled directly from Warsaw.
And if you see a trend of national loyalists being parachuted in, that's a clear signal that the National Party is trying to centralize control over those regional budgets.
It's a huge tell.
Whereas if you see strong local figures dominating the lists, it suggests regional autonomy within the party is still strong.
It reveals the internal political economy of the party. It tells us whether the regional elite is truly indigenous or if it's a curated extension of the central command.
So to synthesize all of this, the votes, the seats, the coalitions, they use specialized indices for quantitative measurement.
They did.
This is where we need to slow down, because for our audience, these indices are the tools that translate the messy reality of politics into measurable trends. Why are they so vital?
They allow for scientific comparison across regions and across time. The researchers use specific metrics tailored to two different markets, the electoral market and the representation market.
Let's start with the electoral market.
For the electoral market, they calculated indices of competitiveness, how close the race was, and proportionality, how accurately the seats reflected the votes. This helps determine if the electoral system itself has a bias.
Standard but necessary. What about the representation market, the structure of the resulting Sejmik?
Here, they used indices of aggregation, how votes cluster among the winning parties, and critically, the effective number of parties.
Let's focus on that one, the effective number of parties. Why is this specific index so important in the context of forming that executive Zarzad?
The effective number of parties is essential because it measures the true level of fragmentation in the assembly. It gives weighted value to parties based on their size.
So it's not just counting parties.
No. If the effective number of parties is high, it means the assembly is fractured among many forces, none with overwhelming dominance. And that directly impacts the complexity of forming the executive Zarzad.
How so?
A high effective number of parties means you're looking at prolonged, difficult, and potentially unstable coalition bargaining, to reach that minimal winning majority.
So if the research shows a consistently rising effective number of parties in a region, we know that forming a stable government there has become objectively harder over time, no matter which specific parties are involved.
Precisely. It turns the subjective experience of coalition difficulty into a measurable political variable.
The fact that they have this full quantitative and qualitative material for the entire 1998 to 2024 period makes this a uniquely powerful resource.
It is. It provides the bedrock for analyzing the evolution of regional political systems, the career paths of regional elites, and all the intricacies of that coalition bargaining.
It truly is a living database of Polish regional evolution. Now, let's circle back to the paradox we touched on earlier, which is maybe the most human and frustrating part of this whole research project, the challenge of public engagement.
The recurring theme. The researchers flagged it as the turnout paradox.
Right.
We have established the monumental budgets, nearly 36 billion PLN, and the essential services they control, like healthcare and transport. Yet, the observation remains.
Turnout in regional elections is often lower.
It's often lower compared to elections for municipal councils or the direct elections for mayors and city presidents.
That flies in the face of logic. If the regional assembly controls the strategic direction of your entire voivodeship, why would citizens prioritize casting a ballot for the municipal council that handles, neighborhood zoning?
Well, the sources do acknowledge the differences aren't always enormous, but their very existence is highly significant.
What does it point to?
It points toward potentially lower citizen interest or, crucially, less knowledge about what regional self-government actually does. We need to explore the hypotheses for why this gap exists. The researchers suggest it's tied to visibility and the clarity of the mandate.
Okay, let's explore those hypotheses. Why the confusion?
One hypothesis is about the visibility of the political process. Local mayoral races are usually highly personalized.
You vote for a face.
You vote for a face, a specific person who promises immediate, tangible changes to your street or your park. Regional elections, however, are dominated by national party logos. And the candidates for the Sejmik, the councilors, are often less known. They're seen as part of a large, abstract legislative machine.
So the average voter might feel disconnected.
Very tangible. But the regional assembly's responsibilities, strategic development, managing EU funds, healthcare planning, they're perceived as more abstract, more complex, farther removed from daily life.
So confusion over who does what, regional versus municipal, it depresses turnout.
It almost certainly does.
In essence, if the citizen doesn't fully grasp the massive scope and power of the regional assembly, they might not prioritize voting in that specific election.
And that, ironically, reinforces the need for research like the Game for Regions.
That's so.
It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Lower engagement allows the political class, which is often controlled by national headquarters, to operate with less scrutiny on these massive budgets.
Right. Now, for those interested in diving into this material, the structure of the publications is incredibly consistent and deliberate.
Yes, that reflects the researchers' focus on comparative analysis.
The sources outline the structure of each monograph in the Cycle 6 published to date, covering elections from 1998 all the way through 2024. This standardization seems key to their success.
It is the methodological backbone. Each volume consists primarily of 16 chapters, one dedicated to each of the Polish voivodeships.
One for each region.
One for each region. This ensures that across all 6 volumes, you have a consistent political history of every single region in Poland. It allows scholars to track trends in specific geographic areas over 2 decades.
And within each of those 16 regional chapters, there's a strict, standardized internal structure that the authors generally follow.
Yes, and this is to ensure the data points are comparable. The structure starts with a short introduction. It outlines the regional scene's specificity and the political situation during the preceding term.
So crucial context.
Crucial context. It describes the coalition patterns, the dynamics of cooperation, and, importantly, any significant internal conflicts or defections that affected the governing Czar's functioning.
That sets the stage. It presents a drama that the upcoming election has to address.
Precisely. The next core section focuses on the campaign analysis. Here, the authors track crucial qualitative details.
Like what?
The character of the electoralists. How many nonpartisan versus partisan candidates, selected aspects of candidate recruitment, the methods of committee promotion, and most importantly, identifying the regional leaders and the regional color of the campaign.
Regional color. I
Yeah.
like that. So those unique local issues, the specific cultural or economic drivers, the influential regional personalities that define the race, even if national parties are involved.
Yes.
That's where the regional specificity the researchers were trying to capture really comes through.
It's where the local issues manage to pierce through the national noise. And finally, each article closes with a detailed analysis of the election results and the competition structure.
So the numbers.
The numbers. This is where they analyze the results at both the regional level and the individual electoral district level, detailing the gains and losses for the parties involved. So it connects the campaign effort back to the electoral outcome.
So a reader gets a comprehensive pre- to post-election deep dive into their specific region, placed within this meticulously analyzed national context. Now, let's consider the target audience for this massive body of work, because the researchers had a very clear dual audience in mind.
They did. They explicitly targeted 2 groups. First, the core academic audience. politologists studying party systems, electoral systems, coalition formation, political elites, electoral marketing.
For them, this longitudinal data is foundational.
It's the evidence base to test complex theories.
But they consciously sought a wider readership, didn't they, the practitioners on the ground?
Absolutely. They hoped, and the sources confirm these hopes were realized, that their audience would expand to include regional politicians, journalists covering local governance, social activists, and critically just interested, engaged citizens.
And that required them to bridge the gap between rigorous academic precision and public accessibility.
Which is a massive challenge. You don't want to dumb down the science, but you need to make it engaging.
How do they do it?
It required a specific communication strategy, which is very evident in the titling convention of their articles. The sources note that the convention they adopted aimed to combine journalistic directness and emotionality with scientific precision and rationality.
That's a fascinating synthesis. You want a title that grabs the attention of a regional journalist or politician,
Something that sounds like it's describing the real political battle.
while assuring an academic peer that the underlying methodology is sound and based on rational analysis.
They needed titles that conveyed the high stakes, the game for regions, to the wider audience, while the body of the article delivered the meticulous evidence-based analysis required by the academic community.
And that approach is key to making sure the research actually informs regional debate and policy, not just accumulating dust in the university library.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about the research itself, but we need to dedicate time to the enduring legacy of the team behind it. This is not a one-off project. It's an immense collective achievement built on nearly 2 decades of continuous collaboration.
The longevity is perhaps the most impressive aspect. The nationwide research team, the Ogólnopolski Zespół Badaczy, dedicated to analyzing these elections, was formally established in 2006.
2006.
That means they've been operating continuously for almost 20 years, consistently tracking these complex, low-visibility political cycles.
That kind of longevity, especially in academic collaborations involving so many different institutions, is incredibly rare. It speaks volumes about the original researchers' foresight.
It reflects a sustained institutional commitment. And what makes this team unique is its comprehensive scope. It draws scientists from nearly all key academic centers in Poland.
So you have built-in regional expertise.
Yes, it ensures that regional knowledge and expertise are integrated directly into the national analysis. The researchers in Poznań write about Wielkopolska, while those in Gdańsk handle Pomerania. It ensures deep regional insight across the board.
So we're talking about a distributed network of regional experts all collaborating under a unified methodology on this one single focused project across the entire country.
And the team calculated that, cumulatively, around 25 individuals have collaborated on this project since 2006.
25 people.
The sources suggest this makes it potentially the longest-running and largest nationwide research team of its kind dedicated to this specific topic in Polish political science. That collective intellectual energy focused on regional politics is just unprecedented.
And what have been the major tangible accomplishments of this team? We know they've filled the knowledge gap, but what are the concrete outputs?
The most immediate output is the 6 multi-authored monographs we've discussed, systematically covering every election cycle. 98 Futuras, 2006, 2010, 2014, 2018, and most recently, the analysis of the 2024 elections.
So the historical record is immediately documented and analyzed after every cycle.
Immediately.
And beyond the publications, the team has been critical in getting their findings out into the broader scientific community.
Absolutely. The team has been actively engaged in academic life, running numerous seminars and panel discussions specifically focused on regional political dynamics at major politological conferences and congresses.
So the findings are immediately integrated into the discourse,
which influences subsequent research. And crucially, they've secured significant external funding, which is essential for sustaining this kind of long-term multi-center research.
Could you highlight those grants? Because funding is often the measure of a project's recognized significance.
They secured a prestigious National Science Center NCN research grant between 2011 and 2012, focused on regional political competition patterns.
Okay.
And more recently, they secured a popularization grant, the Science for Society, or Nauka dla Społeczeństwa grant, which runs from 2023 through 2025.
And that popularization grant is key, isn't it? It explicitly funds their efforts to communicate their dense research to that second audience, the regional politicians, journalists, citizens.
Yes, it proves their commitment to bridging that academic-public divide.
So it confirms that commitment to making their findings relevant beyond the university walls.
It does. The overall impact of this continuous cycle is profound. The data collected during these elections, the raw results, the indices, the recruitment analysis, the coalition mechanics, it provides the foundational material for countless subsequent individual academic papers and collective works by the team members.
It's not just a series of books.
No, it's a living infrastructure for understanding the decentralization of power in Poland.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the sheer financial gravity, the 36 billion PLN budgets, and we navigated through the necessity of specialized indices like the effective number of parties, all centered on a political contest that often flies under the national radar, the game for regions.
And the central insight really remains. Polish regional political life, centered in the Sejmiki, is incredibly consequential. It's driven by this constant friction between powerful, centralizing national political dominance and unique, irreducible local specificity,
The competition is fierce.
defined by the monumental budgets and the sheer scope of the decisions made, from major infrastructure to regional healthcare policy.
And this research project has systematically exposed that complexity. It's given us a roadmap to understand how power truly flows and consolidates in the regions.
It's overcome that initial political science blind spot by creating a comprehensive longitudinal history of this governmental layer.
A vital corrective to the national level focus.
Exactly. It ensures we don't mistake what happens in Warsaw for the complete picture of Polish political life. But as we noted, the one element that consistently challenges the intellectual significance of the Sejmiki is that turnout paradox.
Right. We know these governments control strategic development, major infrastructure, healthcare, all life-changing decisions.
Yet, the source material consistently suggests that citizen knowledge and engagement, reflected in turnout, continues to lag behind hyper-local elections, like those for mayors and municipal councils.
The voters prioritize the politics that feels immediate and personalized.
They do.
So here is the final thought for you to mull over as you process this deep dive. Given the monumental stakes and the life-changing decisions controlled by the voivodeship parliaments, and considering the researchers' finding of consistently lower turnout,
Yes.
what does this enduring gap between the vast scope of regional power and the comparatively low public participation, what does that tell you about where political power truly feels accessible, transparent, and relevant to the average voter in Poland?
It suggests that accountability to the electorate might be perceived very differently at the regional level than at the hyperlocal level.
So what needs to change for that 36 billion PLN budget to feel as immediate and as relevant as a new local park?
A phenomenal question to end on. It highlights that even when the money and the power are massive, if that connection to daily life isn't immediate and the mandate isn't clear, engagement suffers. Thank you for guiding us through the Game for Regions.
A play.